Italian Wine Podcast. Chin Chin with Italian wine people.
Hello, this is the Italian Wine Podcast with me, Monty Waldin. Today's guest is Gerd Stepp. Gerd grew up on his family's vineyard in his native Germany's Pfalz region. The Pfalz is to Germany what Alsace is to France, by the way, the two regions lying either side of an historically hotly contested border. Having finished his studies, Gerd then became a flying winemaker. He worked in both Zimbabwe and South Africa before returning to Europe. So, how did Gerd end up making wine in Italy?
Hello, Monty. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Now listen, how did you end up getting so involved with Italian wine?
I did some work following the training in Germany and working with my parents' vineyards and so on. I then went to go a little bit international and worked in New Zealand, South Africa, Zimbabwe. Then finally I decided to come back a little bit closer to home, to Italy, and started work in Tuscany.
So where was your first job in Tuscany? Which region?
First job in Tuscany was in Mercatale Val di Pesa at a small organic wine producer called Fattoria Espoli, which is sort of located around about just nearby Florence, just a little bit south of Florence.
So what was the lifestyle like? Were you kind of very rigid German, or were you a bit of a fly-by-night, or...?
Not fly by night, but because coming in and first observing a little bit, learning the language, of course. I spoke very limited Italian, so I went to Tuscany, to Florence, and picked up the language there in a school. And also the winemaking was, of course, slightly different, the styles and everything. So I got into learning a little bit with some local winemakers, some consultants, how to vinify Sangiovese, which is slightly different to other regions.
So when you say, did you have a sort of a more modern outlook? Is that what you're saying? And things were maybe more traditional when you arrived in Tuscany?
At that stage, I was probably a little bit more modern. I experienced winemaking in New Zealand, but also in South Africa. Parts of Germany, of course, are a little different because it's more white wine focused. But there was a more modern outlook in the winemaking. But also in the market, I worked in UK, in London before at a retailer called Oddpins. So I had a pretty good experience and knowledge of what maybe the customers and the market wanted, and with that together, then I started in Tuscany, in Mercatale.
So roughly what period of time was that? When was that?
Well, it's almost 20 years ago. I started in 94.
Okay, so when you talked about the sort of UK market, at that period of time, was the UK market looking for very fruit-driven Italian wines?
It was pretty crazy at the time. As I said, I worked at Oddpins, quite a well-known retailer at the time, wine shop, for putting the new world on the map in many ways, and new styles of wine.
So like Australia, New Zealand,
exactly,
those kind of
Australia,
wines, bright,
New Zealand,
fruity.
brighter, fruitier, modern wines, as they were called at the time. And yeah, those were sort of the big times and the changing times. But today would be more revolutionary than evolutionary. There was a big step in the 90s happening here in the UK.
So when you were in Tuscany at that time, did you think it was old-fashioned, or do you think that some of the traditions there were very valid and it was just a question of honing those to make wines that were
I think because I suddenly
market?
Switched back to a winemaker, and I had a lot of conversations with buyers again, and people more engaged in the market and with consumers. They were always challenging me, said, you know how to make wine, you know how to make modern style wine, but we don't find it here. If you can make it for us here, we'll buy it in Tuscany. And they were like really challenging, saying we have a good market, people like Italian wine, but they don't like the style necessarily that it's being offered at the time. This is 22 years ago.
So when you say the wine's a little bit hard and tannic and lacking fruit?
They were hard, tannic, a little bit old-fashioned, traditional, whatever that means, but it was a little bit kind of oxidative, lacking fruit, a bit too extracted. Maybe extraction, dryness in the style that the people didn't enjoy. Again, because at that time the fruit-driven, more vibrant, exuberant wines were the thing on that where everybody was looking at.
So you were in Tuscany recently. How have things changed over the last 20 years? Do you think Tuscany has, quotes, modernised itself? And has that been a good thing or a bad thing?
Absolutely. It has modernised itself. It's still on a journey. I think it does take a little bit of time, but where you see there's been some great steps being done. I know a lot of places in Tuscany, and a lot of the winemakers and everything. They're so much more in tune with what the consumers want. I think there's more connect between consumers and the production, although it's still a journey rather than the end of the journey. the wines are much more fruit-driven, the better tannin management, the oak is much better integrated nowadays. There was a phase where there was no oak, then there was too much oak. I think it's becoming back into better integration. I think there's a great journey at the moment happening in Tuscany.
So what are your favourite grape varieties from Tuscany?
Well, I have to say Sangiovese, of course. It's a great grape variety.
What makes it so great?
I like Pinot Noir. It's what I do also in Germany, and I like Sangiovese because it has the same difficulties but the same challenges and the same rewards. Once you get it right, it's the most amazing grape variety amongst others, but definitely it's an amazing grape variety.
So in your terms of your favourite Tuscan wines made with Sangiovese, are you a fan of Chianti, Chianti Classico, Brunello, Vino Nobile?
I'm definitely Chianti Classico or just Chianti. Brunello is great. All these are fantastic. I'm not disregarding or not disliking the more Bordeaux-esque varieties in Tuscany. I think they're a little bit more challenged. I think they need a little bit more care and handling in the vineyard and a bit more attention to the style, because they don't blend, in my opinion, as well with Sangiovese as some people think they do, and they always and it happens maybe a bit too often. But separately and in the right hands, although also the Bordeaux style wines can perform really well in Tuscany.
Now you mentioned Chianti Classico. Do you think that's one of the world's most underrated wines?
Most underrated in the future, yes. If the journey continues, I think there's a great advantage of the winemaking and the styles for sure. They will be pretty underrated, and it will come back again.
In terms of the Chianti Classico terroir, what makes that special, for example?
The diversity. The crazy thing about Chianti Classico, there are so many hills, so many different terroirs, and I think you have to really know your producer, your town, your village, whatever, to where these grapes are coming from, to actually really make the difference between some of these qualities or names, because often it's always Chianti Classico, but it could be so different from one village to another. There's differences in altitude, difference in the composition of the soil, the inclination, the facing of the vineyard, that it makes a real big quality differentiation.
If you have a really good Chianti, what are you looking for in a really good Chianti Classico?
I look for definition, honesty, expression of the Sangiovese grape. This is not always about the biggest color, the most extraction, the biggest fruit weight. It's about balance in the wine more than actually one or the other. And the most highly regarded for me are which meet that balance in terms of extraction of the during fermentation, during vinification, but also the management of the maturation and so on, and the expression of Sangiovese, which is a bit like Pinot Noir. It's not a big red grape variety. It's more subtle than that, and it can really express the soil and the terroir in a very precise way.
When your eyes light up and we're tasting Sangiovese together, one expression you always come up is, "Oh, I love it. It's got crunchy fruit." What do you mean by that?
Sangiovese has such a lovely fresh fruit, and also the acidity, if picked at the right time, so not too high, not maybe near 15% alcohol, more 13.5% alcohol, and then there's a crunchy, refreshing fruit on the palate, and that, if that is retained by the winemaker and balanced with a little bit of aging in some bigger barrels or oak barrique, then that is just fantastic.
And great match with food. What are your favourite dishes when you're in Chianti Classico?
Oh, I like pappardelle al cinghiale.
Which is pasta with wild boar?
That's pasta with wild pork, yeah. I like stew in the winter, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Stew?
A stew, yeah, like cooked in a pot.
Yeah, that's good with a glass of Chianti as well, or even Brunello, it cuts through the fat, yeah?
Mm.
Where's your next trip?
My next trip will be into Italy. Will be in probably just before harvest again, so around about September to look at vineyards and so on, and then back in September, October for the harvest.
Okay, final question. In terms of Italian wine internationally, where do you think Italian wine can improve its game in terms of its marketing as much as its winemaking?
I think the marketing is already really great because of the acceptance, and I work internationally. I work in Scandinavia. I'm based a little bit in Germany and UK. So I think the reputation is really great, but it does still need to communicate a little bit more with the consumer what it actually is in terms of style, and so there needs a little bit more definition. Tuscan wine, what are they? And also being aware of there is a consumer that is actually developing further, so to keep on track with the further developments in terms of style, and I guess right now a little bit less oak, more fruit-driven wines, a bit more a sense of place, a bit more authenticity is always good, and I think Italy is right on track if they continue where they are.
Okay, Gerd Stepp, flying winemaker, thanks for sharing your thoughts on Tuscany in general and Sangiovese in particular. I look forward to having some wild boar pasta with you at some stage with a big glass of Chianti.
Thanks, Monty. Good to speak to you.
Follow Italian Wine Podcast on Facebook and Instagram.